change, and so is my assignment overnight. So I do not have a prepared text by any means. I speak as a former ambassador to Israel. I speak as a former ambassador to Israel, served as head of the American Embassy twice. 35 years ago, I came as the number 2 to Israel under a great American ambassador, Sam Lewis. And I hark back to certain elements of that time when the euphoria of the Camp David, the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty was beginning to wear off a bit, where things were flaring up in Lebanon, and Israel started or continued to cope with Palestinian terror attacks along the north, and things looked grim in that respect. In a sense, I wish the Egyptian flag were also here. So much, of course, depended on that major breakthrough, which gave a precedent, if you will, for the Jordanian-Israeli peace treaty and many other movements. You know, in those days, harking back to Deputy Minister Hanegbi's excellent summation of some of the progress that's been made, as well as yours, sir, from the European side. In those days, a major Israeli concern pursued constantly had to do with fuel. And we were put into a position of guaranteeing oil supply to Israel by very important side agreements. And these were strenuously pursued negotiations, shall we say. And the United States government, as a result, guaranteed to find, by whatever means, the necessary oil for Israel's consumption should things break down. Now, there were separate agreements that were negotiated on the supply from Egypt, but as insurance, if all else broke down, we would find at world prices the necessary fuel for Israel. To hear from the Deputy Minister today of the progress that's been made on natural gas, Israelis' offshore discoveries, and the guarantees that have already been given to Jordan for certain important quantities of that fuel, that particular fuel, to go into Jordanian production facilities, is really, really heartening. In those days, there wasn't much talk about environment. How heartening it is to hear that there is some effort, because in my experience, and I administered the world's largest bilateral environmental agreement for several years, that is between the United States and the then Soviet Union. And I won't go into all the details. We had hundreds or literally thousands of delegations back and forth during the period of détente. But what you found was that domestically, we, like others, really didn't begin to address our own environmental problems until we began to suffer a certain economic effect from failing to do so. And we found the same in the Soviet Union until they discovered that the Volga, the fish of the Volga were dying in great quantities, and the fishing industry was suffering and so forth, until they realized that the cloud of pollution coming from west over the Scandinavian peninsula was killing their trees. Did they begin to really start to cope? One hopes that it doesn't have to go that far elsewhere in the world. I've seen too many cases of that I could go on recounting of a similar process. One would hope that with globalization of knowledge, in this as many other fields, that Jordanians or people beyond don't have to be persuaded, but will come to realize that cooperation on all fronts, and including the environmental front, is vital to their national security and economic interests. We face today a couple of massive challenges. One is globalization of everything, good and bad. High-tech information, media, social media, and terror. And we are witnessing a combination of religiously rooted, ideologically nationalistic terror, which is ominous and growing. We're concerned in today's discussions with the Middle East, but the phenomena of ISIS or ISIL, Al-Qaeda, and so forth already go far beyond the Middle East, even if you define the Middle East from Iran to the Maghreb and so forth. We're talking about Africa, we're talking about the self-radicalization of young people in England and Europe and the United States, who for a variety of reasons feel impelled to join this kind of terrorist movement, naively or otherwise. It is a development which highlights the importance in the struggle for peace of intelligence agencies, their leadership, and the directions that they get from their political masters. Very, very important subject. We're witnessing the ongoing developments of concern on the nuclear front. And one hopes that a resolution can be achieved with the authorities in Tehran, and this awesome prospect halted, hopefully sealed, but the signs aren't too good. I was never a nuclear specialist, but I recall going all the way back to World War II, the Soviet determination to get their equivalent of the American bomb, even though Harry Truman had offered to share peaceful nuclear data and so forth. Stalin was determined to get this deterrent, and from that day, you could count that the Chinese under Mao would demand it, which demand caused a great rupture in Sino-Soviet relations. And once the Chinese got it, you could be sure that the Indians, with whom they had a great struggle, would go for it. And all the Indian protestations to us that they were involved only in peaceful endeavor masked a clandestine effort on their part to achieve the bomb. And then you could be darn sure that the Pakistanis would go for it as a deterrent. With the Pakistanis achieving it, the expression "a Sunni bomb" began to go about, and you can imagine how that extra element may have affected the thinking among the Shiites in Tehran, and so it goes. These are awesome challenges. They require great attention. Again, they require great international cooperation across so many different sectors as you attempt to cope with this. I will, with that, call attention to the fact that this small institute does indeed constitute, in my mind, a small but very important bridge, a non-political academic research facility to which all are welcome from around the world, and to which many, many more are coming. They're coming from all over. They're coming from Africa, increasingly they're coming from Asia, including China. Or should I say both parts of China. You've had the Chinese foreign minister here. You've had a parallel effort with Taiwanese participation. And as one who has spent a great deal of his career in that particular field, how remarkable it is to note that after millions of lives were lost in the Chinese struggle between Mao and Chiang Kai-shek, and after years and years of the most bombastic bombardment, physical bombardment of the islands held by Taiwan off the China mainland, and after horrendous propaganda campaigns back and forth, as we meet today, there are thousands of visitors from the mainland in all the Taipei hotels, in all the museums and the cultural sites. It's an amazing phenomenon. One wonders if it can happen among those who were so severely divided back then. Why can't we get more of that elsewhere around the world? With that, I welcome Ambassador Dan Shapiro, please.
Well, good morning, Boker Tov. Thank you, Ambassador Brown. It's always a pleasure to be with one of my most distinguished predecessors, and you left our embassy, but through your involvement in the Truman Institute, you never really left Israel, and that's a good thing. Ambassador Farborg Anderson, my fellow panelists, Ambassador Nevo, members of the Hebrew University Executive Committee and the Truman Institute Board of Governors, Professor Blondheim, Nama Speter, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It really is, I want to start with a word about the Truman Institute. It really is a particular pleasure for me to return to the Harry S. Truman Research Institute for the advancement of peace. President Truman gave his blessing to the establishment of an institute, specifying that his name could only be attached to an institution that was actively pursuing peace, which of course this institute has done relentlessly. This conference is just the latest manifestation of your commitment. The Truman Institute is a pioneer in efforts to improve relations and advance peacemaking between Israel and its neighbors, also between other, to build bridges in other conflicts, as we just heard. And we at the U.S. Embassy have been privileged to be partners in these initiatives for over 3 decades. From the dialogue projects of the 1980s that brought Israelis and Palestinians together through your conferences, your research projects, your regional meetings, the work you do complements very much our own work to advance peace. And despite the complications and challenges of regional political and security situations, and in fact maybe because of them, your work in the region continues to be of extraordinary importance and value. Currently, the American Embassy is pleased to support the Truman Institute's Israeli-Jordanian Working Group on the Environment, Water, and Energy, which has brought together specialists to plan and advance joint projects in some of the most fruitful areas of Israeli-Jordanian cooperation. Deputy Foreign Minister Hanegbi mentioned some of the advances in energy and water, and Truman has a piece of that. As many as you know, Ambassador Brown's not my only distinguished predecessor who joined the Truman Institute's leadership cadre. His former boss and all of our mentor, the great Sam Lewis, was also deeply involved in the Truman Institute's work for many years. And of course, we all mourn his passing from earlier this year. A word, too, about returning to Hebrew University, which for me is always a pleasure in a very personal way. This extraordinary university is inseparable from the Zionist idea, and its development has been intertwined in the history of the Zionist movement from its earlier years and the establishment and growth of the State of Israel. And similarly, through the founding of the Truman Institution, with its path-breaking work and distinguished leadership, the university has helped shape its ties with America, and you've in that regard strengthened the unshakable alliance that binds our two nations. And for me, it's always like coming home here. Visited countless times over the last quarter century since I was a student at Hebrew University, and including several times as ambassador. And I continue to draw on my studies here, which helped launch me on a career to gain deeper understanding of Israel and the Middle East. And that's a well that never runs dry. So a word of thanks. Now, the Middle East is notoriously unpredictable. But even so, I think when the Truman Institute staff initially conceived of this conference, planned around the 20th anniversary of the signing of the Israel-Jordan peace treaty, I don't think any of us expected to be facing as complex a picture as we see today. Terrorism rearing its ugly head again right here in the heart of Jerusalem. Provocations seemingly coming from all directions. A complex and multi-front battle in Syria and Iraq, the aftermath of the recent war in Gaza over the summer, instability and terror in Sinai, and growing tension and unrest around the Temple Mount, the Haram al-Sharif, across Jerusalem and beyond. These events comprise among the most unsettling combination of challenges we've faced in this region in many years. And while regional actors will be called upon to take tough decisions to overcome these trials, it's also precisely at these moments that American leadership is so vital. I want to say a word about leaders in the region and the American leadership role. There's, of course, no substitute for engaged and responsible Israeli and Arab leaders to manage crises such as those we face today. Prime Minister Netanyahu and King Abdullah of Jordan spoke directly to one another in recent days, as they have several times before, amidst crises and tensions. That's exactly what needs to happen when these kinds of events occur. They're seeking ways to de-escalate the situation. On another front, Israel and Egypt are in close contact about increased Egyptian military deployments in the Sinai, as called for in the peace treaty, reflecting a common interest they have in preventing terrorist organizations from harming their mutual security. Those kinds of direct contacts and direct communication and coordination mechanisms are essential to managing these kinds of crises and turning them toward opportunities. They're also backed and in some ways grounded in an enduring American investment in peace. Now just try to imagine the Middle East and how it would look today without the decades of the American commitment to enlarging the possibilities for peace and security in this region. If you think about it, the campaign to stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, the efforts to isolate Hamas and its supporters, the ongoing quest for a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and a comprehensive Arab-Israeli peace, all of those efforts would suffer if it were not for the gains that we have achieved so far in the decades past. Think about the tensions right here today in Jerusalem and how much more difficult it would be to unwind what's transpired in recent days without the safety net of American-sponsored Arab-Israeli peace agreements and the prospect of future negotiations, however incomplete and imperfect the results have been so far. President Obama and his administration are constantly striving to identify new opportunities to nurture, sustain, and expand peace in this region. You, Israelis, experienced it during President Obama's historic visit to Israel last year. In his speech in Jerusalem, you heard him make a very simple but also very profound argument. Peace is necessary, peace is just, and most importantly, to those who might give in to despair, peace is possible. I've experienced that firsthand, working with the President in his personal engagement on the diplomacy necessary to end the two conflicts in Gaza that have occurred during my time here in 2012 and again this summer, where the aim was to prevent the firing of rockets against Israeli civilians and restore quiet to Israelis and Palestinians. That took sustained American engagement and leadership in both cases. Here in Israel, you've seen this drive up close every time Secretary Kerry arrives in the region, drawn by his deep commitment to help Israelis and Palestinians resolve their long-running conflict. As scholars here in Israel have studied so carefully, leadership is a decisive factor in peacemaking. It also comes from below, from the people, but it must also be driven from the top, from the leaders. When leaders have stepped forward to make these historic decisions, they have done so with vision, with courage, and with trust. The vision to see beyond today's challenges and imagine the possibilities of a better future. The courage to choose reconciliation and compromise over other policy options. And the mutual trust that makes possible a partnership between one-time adversaries who come to see each other's successes as their own. It was that vision that courage and ultimately that deep sense of trust that led Prime Minister Begin and President Sadat to reach across the divide and take such huge risks for peace. And their legacies endure and continue to inspire. It was also trust that brought together King Hussein and Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, whose terrible murder we commemorated just last week, and who stood here on this campus after the guns fell silent in 1967 and spoke of his own and his nation's commitment to peace. Following the immense achievement of the Israel-Jordan Peace Treaty, which we mark 20 years now, and as the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations struggled forward through the 1990s, the untimely deaths of these two exceptional leaders, King Hussein and Prime Minister Rabin, were some of the harshest losses that President Clinton experienced during his presidency. I worked at the Clinton White House, and I can tell you how the legacies of these courageous peacemakers that he admired so much loomed large over his presidency right up till the very last day. President Clinton, like so many of us, was struck by the warmth and, yes, indeed, the trust that these two leaders felt toward one another. It was a trust that was built up over time, including through quiet diplomacy years earlier, much of which is still shrouded in some mystery. It was a trust that you could see in those iconic photographs of Prime Minister Rabin and King Hussein lighting each other's cigarettes and enjoying each other's company. It was a trust that led King Hussein to eulogize Prime Minister Rabin at his funeral as "my brother." And there is a lesson in their example. Whenever leaders are ready to overcome obstacles and resolve historic conflicts, building trust is very simply a basic precondition. Trust alone is not enough, but its absence and the absence of efforts even to establish trust are like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they all but ensure the perpetuation of the conflict. Now, from outside the region, the United States has long understood that sustaining and deepening peace requires our support from neighbors and from the international community as well. My country has poured enormous support, political, economic, military, into the quest for Israel's security and the chance for it to live in peace with its neighbors. Our investment can be measured in the boundless dedication of successive presidents, secretaries of state, and special envoys who have worked tirelessly to achieve these goals. It can also be measured through our investment in cutting-edge defense systems like Iron Dome and Arrow. It can be measured through the leveraging of global relationships to generate broader support for the two states for two peoples resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and through the building of coalitions to confront terrorism and aggression, and through America's ongoing assistance to Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority, which we've sustained for years at unprecedented level. Our enduring investment in a more secure, more peaceful Middle East is a sacred commitment and very much in our own strategic interest. It's been affirmed by multiple presidents, supported by the United States Congress, and really, I think, quite cherished by the American people. Now, none of us are naive. There are many obstacles, and the road ahead has many twists and turns. Just last week, Jordan recalled its outstanding ambassador to Israel, my good friend Walid Obadat. We very much hope he returns soon. His presence here is vital. Neither has the peace between Israel and Egypt been a simple endeavor, as extremists continue to try to undermine it almost every day. All across the region, there are forces of obstructionism and extremism and rejectionism that are continuing to challenge the forces of moderation. Even if we think back 20 years ago to that amazing celebration in the desert, it was contrasted at the same time with protests and terror. Normalization, then as today, faced tremendous challenges. But in the face of challenges, it's exactly then that supporters of peace must respond by redoubling their commitment. And so it's important that Israelis and Arabs know that the United States will never ease up on its investment in achieving an enduring peace. It's precisely because of this enormous investment that we're so concerned about recent events in Jerusalem. I'll echo the messages you've heard from Secretary Kerry and the White House by restating the United States' belief in the critical importance of maintaining the status quo at the city's holy sites. As Secretary Kerry said in Paris, the recent confrontations, including at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, are of deep concern to us. The holy sites should not become sites of tension, and concrete steps need to be taken now by all sides to de-escalate that situation. The Secretary noted, and of course the Israeli government notes as well, that Jordan has a very special role to play at the holy sites that is enshrined in the peace treaty, and obviously we hope all parties will work to reduce those tensions. My government's in close contact with all the parties who have a stake here, and we're exploring a range of ways we can support a de-escalation. At a time like this, it's also important that we restate the core principle that violence and terrorism are unacceptable. The United States has repeatedly condemned recent terrorist attacks, including the horrific incidents at the light rail stations in which innocents were murdered, and the abhorrent attempt to kill Yehuda Glick, and we wish him refuah shlema. Now, gathering as we are in Jerusalem, there's more than enough going on locally to monopolize all our attention, but if we pull our gaze back a little bit, we can see there are some other major struggles around the horizon as well. And I'd like to speak briefly about one of those struggles. That's the U.S.-led effort to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL. The fight against ISIL is today one of the United States' highest priorities. Whether we call it a cancer or a scourge, ISIL, which represents neither Islam nor a state, is carrying out a campaign that is nothing short of an attack on humanity. The brutal murders of Americans James Foley and Stephen Sotloff will not soon be forgotten, nor will the despicable acts of violence that have been perpetrated against thousands of Iraqi and Syrian civilians. The United States is leading a battle against ISIL because we recognize the threat it poses to our friends and allies in the region, to civilian populations in its path, and ultimately to the United States and others beyond the Middle East. Our strategy stands on 4 pillars. First, the United States and our coalition partners have launched hundreds of airstrikes against key ISIL targets in Iraq and Syria, which are having an impact, destroying ISIL military assets, and supporting local ground forces in their efforts to roll back ISIL's gains. Second, as President Obama said in September, we will increase our support to forces fighting these terrorists on the ground, which we're doing in both Iraq and Syria, through military advisors to the Iraqi security forces and the Kurdish Peshmerga, and the equipping and training of vetted moderate Syrian opposition elements. Third, we're drawing on our existing counterterrorism capabilities to cut off ISIL's sources of funding and stem the flow of foreign fighters. Fourth, we're continuing to provide humanitarian assistance to the millions of Syrians and Iraqis who are in desperate need. We're the lead donor for an enormous international effort led by the United Nations, which aims to reach so many in need, including many vulnerable minorities. The U.S. role reflects our American values and our humanity, as well as our strategic interests, and we're prepared for a long fight, understanding it's a complex battlefield. The unprecedented makeup of the anti-ISIL coalition is evidence not only of the international consensus of the need to quickly reverse ISIL's advances, but also of the unifying threat ISIL poses to a broad array of countries in the Middle East and around the world. And within that contains, in fact, the seeds of some additional opportunities for strategic cooperation across this region. We're focused on the diplomatic front, where we've gained tremendous support and legitimacy for our actions. Just look at the September meetings of the UN Security Council that were chaired by President Obama and Secretary Kerry. The world stood together alongside the United States in expressing support for the campaign against ISIL, and it's one we'll prosecute to its completion. As President Obama said last year in Jerusalem, and it was a reminder again to us in those meetings at the United Nations in September, whether it's in the pursuit of peace or in the need to confront threats to our own common security, American leadership must remain a constant feature in this uncertain world. So thank you again for the chance to address this conference. My team and I are eager to hear from the other speakers gathered today and continue to benefit from our partnership with the Truman Institute. Wish you success in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I call on Ambassador Daniel Nevo, Israel's ambassador to Jordan, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm personally very excited to see here very important people from my past, and some of them are peace builders like Ambassador Ephraim Halevi, Ambassador Shamir, Ambassador Gabay, Barkan, and many colleagues. And I'm really delighted to be here. I would like to to focus a little bit on the Jordanian side rather than the Israeli side, and I'll immediately tell you why. I've arrived to Jordan firstly on June 2000, and next week I'll be celebrating personally my 12th year in Jordan. I've served 6 years as a DCM in the Israeli embassy in Jordan, left in September 2006 and came back in November 2009 as an ambassador. And my slogan as an ambassador was that the national interest of Jordan is an Israeli national interest, and we have to realize that, because such projects have as the desalination to swap water between Jordan and Israel, which was initiated by Professor Uri Shani, the head of Israeli Water Authority, was presented to the Jordanian by us in 2008, and unfortunately only in, luckily only in December last year it was signed, and 2 weeks ago we have established a formula in which the tenders for the implementation of the project will go ahead. But I would like to emphasize on the Jordanian side, and I hope that in a few words I will describe what's going on in Jordan and why the situation is so fragile and so sensitive. Jordan is a kingdom combined. Today they have over 11 million inhabitants in Jordan. Only 7 million out of them are Jordanians. Out of these 7 million, a majority of 65% are from Palestinian origin. So anything happens in our side of the river, even in Gaza or in the West Bank, has an immediate impact on the Jordanian society. And we have to realize that. And I will come back to Al-Aqsa question and to the gravity of the situation of Al-Aqsa and why it is so important. Because we are in a situation in which we are going to sign 2 major strategic agreements. We have amazing ties in the security field that I don't know much about it, and we will not talk about it, but all of that is in jeopardy because of a situation that can be out of our hand. Haram al-Sharif or Al-Aqsa or Temple Mount, whatever you call it, we have to realize that not only that we have recognized His Majesty King Abdullah II as the custodian of the holy sites for Islam in the holy in Haram al-Sharif, this is a situation in which most of 1.8 billion Muslims in the world don't really care about reality or about the facts or about the status quo. What they care is some of the imams will say that the Jews are conquesting or penetrating Al-Aqsa. It's enough. And it is enough to put every Israeli and Jew all around the world in jeopardy. It is enough to put all these peace agreements in jeopardy. And we have to realize that members of Knesset of Israel, when they are going up to the Haram al-Sharif, in the eyes of the laymen in Jordan, it is with the agreement of the Prime Minister of Israel, which is not a reality. The Prime Minister commit himself more than once that he is committed to maintain the status quo. They don't give a damn, sorry about the word, about it. They don't really care about the facts. We have to take precautions and to do our utmost in order to maintain the peace and quiet and the status quo in Haram al-Sharif, because this can be the explosion of everything. And we have to realize that every citizen of Israel have to realize that the Jordanian citizens are not watching Channel 2. They are watching Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera chooses to show its audience what he ever chooses to show, and not necessarily the reality. We have to take it into consideration and to work very hard on it in order to maintain this peace over, as written in our papers, over troubled water. Because I was here in Truman Institution, I think in 2004, celebrating the 10th anniversary. It was a month after we assisted Sheikh Yassin to reach his peace, and turmoil all around the region, and I had to evacuate the embassy again. I was there with the security officer only for over than 3 months. So we have to realize that troubled water, this is the situation. I've realized this is reality, and how can we exist in such reality? And we should not lose hope, and we should work on the public and civil projects in order to make the peace between two nations. I remember when the peace treaty was signed, I was in Norway in discussions of, I was the coordinator of the refugee working group in the multilateral peace talks. And the peace treaty was signed on the 26th of October. And one of the Israeli journalists unfortunately said something that I can never forget. He said, it's a huge peace between the whole nation of Israel and one king. We should change this equation. We should work very hard in order to make it a peace between nations, because the Jordanians are always complaining, what are the real fruits of peace? We don't see any real fruits of peace. And in some way we have to emphasize what really are the fruits of peace, and there are many of them. One of the most important fruits of peace that the Jordanians are aware but not mentioning publicly is the issue of water, because the agreements between Israel and water exist long ago before the peace treaty. Only 2 weeks ago, the Jordanian Minister of Water called me and asked for an additional 2 million cubic meter of water to face the challenges in Zaatari refugee camp populated by over 600,000 Syrians. And I wasn't waiting for a second. I said yes, although I don't have the authority, but I was sure that I will convince my Minister of Energy and Water, and we did so. So there are really fruits of peace, but they are not enough, and they are not published enough in the Palestinian society. We have to realize that I'm saying Palestinian society in purpose because they are 65 to 70% of the society of the population of Jordan. And we have to realize that the connection between the Palestinians in the West Bank and the East Bank are so tight. Just for an example, in 2013, 1.9 million Palestinians crossed the border in King Hussein Allenby checkpoint to cross between the West Bank and the East Bank. So we have to take it into account in our calculations and our actions towards the stability and building the stability of this peace treaty. I have to emphasize that in 2000, when I just arrived to Jordan, I was visiting Madinat al-Hassan, in which the qualified industrial zone was working, and at that year the export from this area to America was equivalent to $11 million. In 5 years, it reached $1 billion, thanks to the United States government, which exempt the product of textile free of taxes straight to the United States. Such a project, which lost its impact because of the trade treaty, which was signed directly with the United States, and Jordan took the value of it out of any economical cause, so it is not valid anymore. But for many years, for 5 years, this project brought many thousands of jobs and billions of dollars to the economy of Jordan. Jordan economy is so fragile that it consists out of the budget of Jordan for last year was approved in the parliament. It is $14 billion US. $3.5 billion the Jordanians are dedicating every year for energy. So the project of energy which was signed between Israel and Jordan, which I really hope will be implemented in 2018, will save directly to the Jordanian economy over $700 million a year. This is a project that we should emphasize and that we should support in order to carry it out and to make it happen, because it will directly inject a very important support to the Jordanian economy and to the Jordanian budget. So these strategic projects like the water and energy are not enough. Even the very tight security ties are not enough. We have to realize that the fragile situation in the Temple Mount is above any other thinking with the Jordanian, because King Abdullah II knows exactly the situation in Haram al-Sharif. He have the data up to date and he knows, but when something happens in Haram al-Sharif, no one complained to King Abdullah II. They immediately complained, the Waqf there, they are immediately taking the phone and complaining to Qatar, to Saudi, to Cairo, and these bodies in Saudi, in Qatar, and in Cairo are complaining and putting a lot of pressure on King Abdullah. He cannot be immune from this pressure, and this pressure affect Jordan severely. We have to realize that, to take it into consideration and to take the right steps. The government of Israel cannot allow the extremists to take over Al-Aqsa and do whatever they want to do, and to change the status quo in which they will not allow tourists and Jews to go on the Temple Mount. This is not acceptable. On the other hand, we have to take real steps in order to stop the radicals of trying to provocate Temple Mount, because this is the main issue. Above all the important issues that I've just mentioned, this thing can explode everything, and we have to realize that and take it into account today. On another issue, we have to share with the Jordanians as many as possible projects based on people to people. We are trying to do so. Unfortunately, we are facing an enormous objection in the unions, which are too strong in my opinion, that are objecting any cooperation between Israelis and Jordanian. We have many small projects like fighting diseases which have no borders, like agreements in agriculture, in the field of tourism and environment. Today I have to leave in an hour to join a huge conference on environment taking place in Kempinski Hotel on the Jordanian side of the Dead Sea. So in 2003, under the auspice of ambassador of the United States ambassador at that time, we have signed a very important agreement to the safety of the Red Sea in Aqaba, which is one of the cornerstones that prevent any Jordanian entrepreneurs to put the cages of fish in the Red Sea, in the Jordanian side. We were establishing our objection on this agreement, which was signed in 2003. So in the field of environment, we have many important things that are taking place. We have many projects on the field of paramedics. Only a year and a half ago, 18 Jordanians graduate as paramedics after 3 years of studying in the University of Ben Gurion, and they are actually saving lives in Jordan. In 2003, the toll road in Jordan was 950 casualties in 1 year. It dropped down to less than 300 this year because of one of the reasons is this important project that took place between Jordan and Israel, between Magen David Adom and Red Crescent. So we have to take into account what is Jordan, what the Jordanian regime have to face on a daily basis. Jordan is facing now a massive movement of refugees and other. There are over 2 million Syrians that fled Syria and came to Jordan. This is a huge pressure on the Jordanian economy. The Jordanian economy is subsidizing over 25 products like water, electricity, wheat, oil, sugar, and others. And there are 4.5 million foreigners living in Jordan, enjoying the subsidies without paying any taxes. And we have to realize that the pressure on Jordan is massive. So we have to do our utmost to ease the pressure from Jordan from our side. Not enough is being done. And we are trying in our ministry, myself, the ambassadors who were there before me, we are trying very hard in order to promote relationship between people to people and to establish small projects that are not big enough to be on the press or television, but are important enough to bring people together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that very penetrating exposition. Very, very important. Thank you. I now yield to the next panel.